Hello, a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of you. Welcome to the fifth session of She and Rights, that is Sexual Health with Equity and Rights Initiative. She and Rights sessions are together hosted by Global Center for Health Diplomacy and Inclusion, that is CEDI, International Planned Parenthood Federation, that is IPPF, Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women, or ARROW, and Women's Global Health Network for Reproductive Rights, that is WGNRR, and also Asia Pacific Media Alliance for Health and Development, or APCAT Media, and CNS. Today's entire session of She and Rights is being live streamed on Dr. TSPR Media Channel. Thanks a lot, Dr. Reddy, who is the medical doctor and founder editor of the channel, for helping promote the cause. A few quick announcements before we begin. Participants can please type in their questions and comments in the chat box even as the speakers present. You do not have to wait till the end of the session to do so. And please also mention the name of your organization as far as possible. We will take up as many relevant questions as time permits after all the speakers have presented. Also, I'm sure all of us will keep us muted as other speakers present. Thank you for your attention. Friends, next month in March, which will actually begin from tomorrow, governments and other stakeholders will meet in New York at the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, which was formed in 1946, with the sole aim to promote gender equality. Next month is also the International Women's Day. The CSW 69 will primarily focus on reviewing the progress, or rather lack of it, on the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, marking the BEIJING+30 milestone. As we all know, the Beijing Declaration is a United Nations resolution that outlines a plan to achieve gender equality and women's rights. It was adopted in 1995 at the United Nations 4th World Conference on Women in Beijing, and hence the name. I personally believe that feminist movement is among the most progressive struggles of our times historically. Here I am tempted to recap a few quotes of those who have been involved with this years back. 50 years ago in 1975, at the first UN World Conference on Women, which was held in Mexico City, delegations from 133 countries took part in it. And mind you, 113 of them were led by women. Then, at that time, Elizabeth Reed, a delegate from Australia, had said, "In the world outside, we are ignored. We are invisible. We are not important. We have got to change these attitudes towards us, smilingly if necessary, angrily if necessary, and aggressively if necessary. Otherwise, there will be no such thing as true equality." Is that not true even today? At the same conference, the world's first female prime minister, Sirimavo Bandaranaike, the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, had said, "We are here not only to demolish discrimination, but to envision the benefits to the human race of integrating this forgotten half of humanity in development." And at the 4th UN World Conference on Women, which was held in Beijing in 1995, where the Beijing Declaration and its platform of action was adopted, United States delegate Hillary Clinton had said, "If there is one message that echoes forth from this conference, let it be that human rights are women's rights and women's rights are human rights once and for all." I am humbled to learn more about the history of feminism and the struggle that has gone relentlessly to dismantle patriarchy and promote gender equality and respect for human rights. Our dear friend Anjali Shenoy has kindly agreed to give us a refresher on the Beijing Declaration and its platform of action, the CSW process, and the upcoming CSW 69. Anjali is a noted intersectional feminist and serves as program manager for monitoring and evidence generation for change at the Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women. Welcome, Anjali. Over to you.
Thank you, Shubha. I just share my screen. Sorry, just give me 1 minute. Yeah, I'm just
Sure
going
thing.
to.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. No, no.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes, we can. Very good. Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to turn off my camera just so that it doesn't create any interruption in
Okay.
the. Yeah. Okay, so yeah. Thank you, Shobha. Thank you for that introduction. And you also gave us a little bit of background, but just going a little further into what we are talking about when we mentioned the Beijing Declaration and the Beijing Plan for Action. So just to recount history a little bit, as Shobha mentioned, the United Nations had organized 4 world conferences on women. It started in 1975 at Mexico City. That was the first World Conference on Women. It was held during the International Women's Year, and it was a declaration was also made to engage in that decade, which is 1975 to 1985, as the decade of women. Following that, 5 years later, there was another World Conference in Copenhagen in 1980, and another one in 1985 in Nairobi. Um, and then following these world conferences basically talked about the status of gender equality, women's rights over 5 year periods, and the, the 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 last or the fourth world conference that was held in Beijing was the biggest of them all. It was a landmark conference of its kind. It was held in 1995, a decade after the 85 conference was held. It was attended by about 189 countries, and there was also a parallel civil society conference that was held at that time that was attended by close to 30,000 feminists from across the world, both from the global south as well as the north. Uh, that's just one of the pictures from the NGO forum that was held at that time. One of the uh, landmark outcomes of this conference was known as the Beijing Declaration and the Platform for Action. It laid out 12 points of action on 12 thematic areas including women in poverty, education and training, women in health, violence against women, women in armed conflict, women in the economy, power and decision making, institutional mechanisms, human rights of women, women in the media, women in environment, and the girl child. uh, this declaration and platform for action was accepted by all 189 countries that were present at the conference, and they also pledged towards working towards the goals set out in this platform for action. This Such a document was the first of its kind, and more importantly, the fact that it was ratified by 189 countries made it an extremely important document and really pivotal in our feminist advocacy of its in the feminist advocacy of its time. Uh, since 1995, there has been a periodic review of the Beijing Platform for Action every 5 years. This review involves national reviews that are done at the country level, that are led both by civil society as well as the governments of that country. There is a regional review that is led by the regional UN offices for that region, and involves both again civil societies as well as the governments and member states of the region. The regional review usually consists of a CSO forum as well as the intergovernmental forum, and with opportunities for side events along with the governmental forum. And then finally, the review culminates at the global level at the Commission of the Status of Women, or CSW, in New York, where it examines the progress and obstacles in women's rights since the adoption of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in 1995. And this review, of course, takes into consideration the reviews done at both at the national as well as the regional review. What is included in the periodic reviews uh, of the Beijing Platform Action? There is an analytical track which looks at data that has been collected from across the countries and the region. There is a consultative track, which is what I mentioned, includes consultations with civil society, with other stakeholders, with governments themselves. And then, of course, there is an intergovernmental track, which is where the intergovernmental forum comes into play. This periodic review, as I mentioned, happens every 5 years. So at the BEIJING+10, the calls for action were tied to the Millennium Development Goals. At +20, it was tied to ensuring gender equality features in the post-2015 development framework. At 25, although it was COVID times, and it was not held at a scale at which it is usually done. However, we still saw the co-hosting of the gender equality forums by governments of Mexico and France, and the formation of action coalitions at that time. And of course, now we are here at Beijing+30. The idea this time is to influence the SDG+10 processes, as well as the World Social Summit on Development that is also to be held this year, and to address the poly crisis that the world is facing at the moment. Just to give a little bit of a background on how the regional review, of how the process works. So like I mentioned, for Beijing+30 this year, in 2024, there were Beijing+30 national reports that were developed. There were Beijing+30 regional consultations that were held. These consultations were organized by the civil society steering committee that was set up by UN Women to organize civil society in the region, and to bring together people, to bring together stakeholders for these consultations, as well as to organize the CSO forum. Uh, in November last year, we had in Bangkok, we had the Beijing+30 Youth Feminist Forum, as well as the CSO Forum. This is for the Asia Pacific region. So we have the Youth Feminist Forum and the CSO Forum, followed by the Asia Pacific Ministerial Conference on Beijing+30, Beijing+30's review, as well as side events. This process has culminated in its own reports. There are, of course, national reports. There is a report that has come out of the regional consultations. There are statements by the Youth Feminist Forum as well as the CSO Forum that highlights where we are at currently on gender equality in post 30 years since the Beijing Declaration. That these statements were also presented and read out during the ministerial conference. And then, of course, there is the report by the chair of the ministerial conference itself, which also includes reports of the side event. All of these reports together will be reviewed and analyzed at the CSW. Just as I mentioned, the UN also sets up a steering committee, and this is the role of the steering committee. So, as I was saying, all of these reports will be looked and reviewed at the CSW 69. CSW, or the Commission for the Status of Women, happens in New York. It is scheduled for next month, which is in March. It is attended by UN entities, member states, and NGOs that have ECOSOC or UN accreditation. And what happens at the CSW? So, what happens at 69 CSW is there will be a review of the progress in implementing the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, assess current challenges to gender equality and women's rights, of course, celebrate the gains since the Beijing Declaration, and create a space for shifting power to marginalized communities, and underscore commitments by member states to gender equality, especially in the face of the many crises that we are facing today, including conflict, climate, and the anti-rights forces. What are some of the advocacy opportunities for feminist groups and civil society? So there are often parallel events that are held at CSW outside of the UN space that gives civil society an opportunity to come together, to bring their voices together and create calls for action that can then be presented in the form of oral statements, both at the general discussion as well as the interactive dialogue during CSW by the organizations that are present in the room. This is an opportunity for civil society and activists to engage with their national delegations and make sure their inputs and their voices are part of what the national delegation has to say. This is also an opportunity for us to reach out to the member states and influence their agendas and their policies and demand accountability from them. And finally, of course, it is our time. It is the time for the women's movement, for us to come together at a global space, to be to showcase our resilience, to showcase our defiance to the challenges, in the face of the challenges that we face, and to hold our member states accountable to the communities that we are representing at this space. So that's all I have, just as a quick refresher. Thank you so much for giving me this opportunity.
Thank you very much, Anjali. Thanks for such a lucid explanation of the whole process, including periodic reviews taking place every 5 years. And Anjali, with 30,000 feminists at Beijing in 1995, and with 30 years down the line, let us now deliberate upon where we are now. And so I invite Kavita Mutua from Kenya to tell us about the current situation in Africa 30 years after governments adopted the Beijing Declaration in 1995. And as Anjali told us, there were 30,000 feminists who attended that. Kavita is a lawyer in Kenya High Court and founder director of the Legal Caravan. Over to you, Kavita.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shoba. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
Yes.
Okay, I hope, is my screen visible?
Yes, yes, very clear.
Okay, my name is Kavitha Mutua. I'm an advocate and lawyer based in Nairobi, Kenya. And I am the founder and director of an organization called the Legal Caravan, which is a human rights-based organization. We're passionate about sexual and reproductive health and rights, SGBV, and refugee rights. And I'm excited to be back here. So just allow me to turn off my camera so that we can focus on the presentation. Minute. Sorry, Shoba.
No, that's fine. That's okay.
Can you still see my screen?
Just see your screen, but it's not in the slide sharing mode, I think. We can see your screen, yes.
And now?
Earlier it was, we can see your full screen along with the.
Oh no. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, we can see the screen.
But is it on the slides?
No, it's not in the slide mode. Like we can see the first slide on your screen.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
now
you can see that it's...
Yes, now it's okay. Yes.
All right. Sorry. So as Anjali has highlighted, the previous speaker, the Beijing+30 declaration has 12 focus areas, but allow me to focus on 3 for my presentation today. That is on women and health, violence against women, and human rights of women out of the 12 focus areas, because this is the area my organization and I focus on. And of course, as you know, there are 54 countries in Africa. So I cannot highlight everything during these 10 minutes. So allow me to focus on the 3 while I touch a bit on a few African countries from what I've been able to gather from the already submitted reports and statements as the previous presenters highlighted. So on the 3 focus areas under violence against women and girls, from what I was able to gather, 36 countries report to have established and strengthened survivor support services, that is shelters, helplines, and legal aid. 35 countries have enacted laws related to violence against women and girls, and 29 countries report to have prioritized ending child marriages, domestic violence, and sexual harassment, while 32 countries have passed laws related to violence from the technology angle. On matters women and health, 37 countries have expanded universal health coverage, and 35 countries have prioritized sexual and reproductive health, maternal health, and HIV care. On matters comprehensive sexuality education, 21 countries have improved on the same. For my country, Kenya, unfortunately, I can't report on this. We are still struggling to have proper comprehensive sexuality education. And countries like Liberia have introduced integrated health programs, while Rwanda and Ethiopia have enhanced family planning and reproductive health services. So all hope is not lost. There's a bit of progress in the health sector. And on the rights of women, particularly on representation, we've seen 15 African countries surpass the 30% Africa parliamentary representation. We always look up to Rwanda, which is leading with about 64%. And Senegal's gender parity law a positive impact has been that it's improved women's participation in parliament to 44%. And 25 countries have introduced the electoral quotas, and Ghana has committed to 50% female representation in public life by 2030. So I think just like Ghana, we're still in the promising stage through our laws and policies, but we are yet to implement, same as Kenya. And for some of the Northern African and Southern African nations, they've strengthened their women's land rights and financial inclusion. We're now seeing more women able to access their land rights, inherit and own property. And just more on the progress, for example, in the Eastern and Southern African region, we have the famous ESA commitments towards expanding access to comprehensive sexuality education. But unfortunately, as you'll see, for some countries, we've seen a very naughty trend of getting out of these commitments with no explanation, which is what countries like mine have done. And as highlighted, of course, there's an increase in uptake of contraceptives in Ethiopia, Uganda. And Matters CSC, we've seen some of the curriculums incorporate the same, that is in South Africa, Namibia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana. And on maternal mortality rates, countries like Rwanda, we've seen a reduction in the same. And again, South Africa is widely celebrated for having incorporated very progressive laws around abortion rights. And of course, for many African countries, I think most of us represented on here, I've seen Nigeria, Malawi, Kenya. I think we can all attest to the fact that we are party to very many international, regional, progressive human rights instruments, and even our local laws. Some of them tend to be very progressive, but as I said, the challenge comes when it comes to implementation. Of course, we are party to the CEDAW Convention, most countries, the ICPD, the Beijing Declaration, which is what we are highlighting today. And these frameworks have the cross-cutting themes around abortion, contraceptives, access to CSC, and in FGM and child marriage, but we still have a long way to go in terms of implementation. And there are various policy frameworks specific to the African region. That is, for example, the African Continental Policy Framework on SRHR. We have the celebrated Maputo Protocol, which is the most progressive women's rights instrument, and this is specific to the women and girls of Africa. We have our African Charter on Human and People's Rights and the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child. So I think, as you can see, in terms of laws and policies, we do not have a shortage of the same. And recently, as a big win, the African Union Convention on Ending Violence Against Women and Girls was adopted, I think, 2 weeks ago, which again is a legal instrument aimed at preventing and ending violence against women and girls in Africa. So towards achievement and fulfilling of the promises under BEIJING+30, I think you can see that in terms of laws and policies, we are doing quite a good job. But as you'll see, as I highlight some of the challenges still persist in terms of implementation, again, due to various reasons, as I will highlight later on in my presentation. On matters women health, the maternal mortality rates remain very high, with 27 countries exceeding the SDG target of less than 70 deaths per 100,000 live births. That is still a very low number. And then on matters budgetary allocation, we're still at 6%, very, very low, very far from the global average of 10.35%. And much as teenage pregnancy, we still struggle with the same, especially in the region of Eastern and Southern Africa. And on violence against women, again, we see 34.6% of girls aged between 15 and 49 still undergoing FGM, with countries like Somalia and Gambia reporting very, very high cases. South Africa in 2020, again, declared gender-based violence a second pandemic. And of course, the numbers already seem high, but these are, again, underreported. So on matters violence against women and girls, we have a long way to go. For Kenya, matters femicide have been a big issue. And we've seen the numbers still on the rise, despite having all these laws, policies, commitments, and we have a long way to go on that. And on matters the human rights of women, despite countries like Rwanda leading with the 64% representation, as we've seen, there's still very, very low representation, and 16 countries are yet to implement the gender-responsive budgeting, and women in conflict zones continue to face very high levels of violence, and this hinders their full participation towards gender equality. So despite the progress we've seen, there's still a long way to go, as I have briefly highlighted on the 3 focus areas. And some of the challenges around implementation of the laws, policies, and commitments has been the legal barriers, which emanate from very restrictive laws and policies. And then we have cultural and religious oppositions to family planning. I mean, as an African country, religion has a very, very big influence on what people believe in and how they perceive certain issues. And in accessing, for example, contraceptives in matters, access to abortion services, their influence has limited access to the same by women and girls. And then we also have financial limitations, of course, and issues of budgetary allocation, as I've highlighted. Countries, again, continue to defy court orders. For example, for my country, Kenya, the court ordered them to reinstate the abortion regulations that were withdrawn about 10 years ago, but the same is yet to happen. So again, a lack of political goodwill. In the Eastern African region, we have the famous SRH bill, which was very promising and very progressive, but it's yet to be passed because there's a lack of political goodwill and commitment from the various countries. And then, as I said, there is the issue of withdrawing from commitments. For example, the ESA commitments, which are the ESA commitment, which was very progressive, countries like mine have withdrawn with no explanation. Again, Maputo Protocol, for my country, Kenya, we've placed reservations on issues around abortion services. And so as you can see, despite having very progressive laws, there's either lack of implementation or reservations or just withdrawing entirely from what people had previously committed to. And then there's a lack of strong accountability mechanisms. Despite us going for the CSW, we now have CSW 69. There's always the conversation around the cycle of reporting, having recommendation, and then unfortunately going back to non-implementation. So I think maybe it's time to discuss harsher sanctions. Maybe it's time to take more serious action against non-implementation to avoid the repetitive cycle. And then we've seen the issue of contradicting foreign policies. For example, the Geneva Consensus Declaration, which was reinstated a few weeks ago, again, limiting access to safe abortion services and other SRHR services, and the global gag rule. So for countries like Kenya and many other countries represented here in Africa, we have very progressive laws, and also under the Maputo, as we've seen. But then our countries are slowly signing on to and making commitments in international policies that contradict what has already been passed in law, both regionally, internationally, and locally. So we need to have conversations of perhaps how to maneuver that. Should we turn to our courts? Should we push harder in terms of advocacy for our countries not to sign on to some of these policies? I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. And then I think we'll discuss this more when it comes to the panel discussion. But of course, as a way forward, we would need to continue strengthening partnerships between civil society and local advocacy groups that advocate for not just the 3 focus areas I've highlighted today, but all the 12. And then again, of course, international collaborations like what we're doing today, knowledge sharing between different countries on the best practices, what they've done. I'm keen to hear what other regions have done, where they're at, and what sort of strategies they've been able to successfully employ. Thank you very much. I think my 15 minutes is over, and I'll hand back to Shoba.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Kavita, for such a comprehensive overview of the African situation. And you have indeed focused on very important areas, that is violence against women and girls, women's health, and human rights of women. they are basically the cog in the wheel, which we need to propel forward. And we will come back to you during the panel discussion, as you had mentioned, to talk about the recommendations, way forwards, and why we are lacking, why the progress is not as good as it should be. So thank you for that. And now let us listen to Dr. Sian Anile. Dr. Sian Anile is an expert in gender equality and social inclusion, SRHR, and education with over a decade of experience. She is deeply committed to advancing public health research from a feminist perspective. In her current role at the Center for International Reproductive Health Training, Sian contributes to strengthening quality SRH services and promoting gender equality. She has just sent us the video of her presentation, as she has an unstable internet connection, although she is very much online. So she will be available to answer questions in the Q&A session. So let us listen to her.
Hello everyone, I am Siani from Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. I'm a gender equality and social inclusion advocate and sexual and reproductive health expert and researcher. I'm very thankful for the organizers for bringing us all together to speak and discuss about gender equality in the context of the current African situation, and I will also speak particularly in the context of Ethiopia, my country. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. The topic of
Can I interrupt? Can I interrupt? It would be good. I think there is some sound quality problem in the video. So would you like to speak if your internet connection permits you? Sian? There. Or
Hello everyone, I am Siani from Ethiopia, Addis Ababa. I'm a gender equality and social inclusion advocate and sexual and reproductive health expert and researcher. I'm very thankful for the organizers for bringing us all together to speak and discuss about gender equality in the context of the current African situation, and I will also speak particularly in the context of Ethiopia, my country. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. The topic of my speech will be gender equality as the key to Africa's future.
thank you.
In many parts of Ethiopia, the birth of a boy is celebrated with 7 ululations, while a girl marks the beginning of a lifelong gender bias that favors men over women. Societal norms place greater value on boys, shaping their opportunities in education, economic participation, and leadership, while reinforcing barriers for girls. These biases accumulate over time, limiting women's potential and perpetuating gender inequality across generations. Despite their critical role in national development, women in Africa continue to face widespread discrimination and violence solely due to their gender. Gender equality is not just a human right and a matter of social justice. It's a crucial foundation for sustainable development, peace, and progress. Achieving this vision requires long-term commitment, such as Beijing Declaration Platform for Action, to build a more just and equitable society. The Beijing Declaration serves as a global agenda for women empowerment, emphasizing the need for women to play an equal role in economic, social, and political decision-making. As we approach the 30th anniversary of the Declaration in 2025, it's important to recognize the progress made while acknowledging that we're still far from achieving its goal. Since the Beijing conference, Africa has made significant strides, particularly in social sectors such as education and health. However, persistent challenges remain in the economic empowerment and political participation. The 2023 African Gender Index highlights that women in Africa score just 50.3% in gender equality across economic, social, and public representation areas. This is only a modest improvement from 48% in 2020. Progress through legal reforms and policy change, such as constitutional guarantees of women's rights, establishment of a dedicated women affairs ministry, and reforms in the family law, such as women's right to land ownership and criminal code. Women political participation has also increased significantly in Ethiopia, with female representation in the parliament rising from 6% to 42% during the post-Beijing, alongside a 50% quota in the ministerial cabinet. According to many African nations, girls now surpass boys in primary and secondary school completion rate, reflecting improved access to primary education. However, this progress diminishes at higher level education, with fewer women enrolled in the tertiary institutions. Despite these gains, Africa still has a long way to go in fully realizing the commitment of the Beijing Declaration. Women, who make up nearly half of the population, continue to face systemic barriers in employment, political leadership, and access to resources. Global instability, driven by war, conflict, pandemic, and climate change, has exacerbated gender inequalities, increasing unpaid care, exposure to violence, and restrictions on women's agency. In Ethiopia, as in many African countries, setbacks in gender equality have emerged due to the pandemic, shrinking civic space, and internal conflict. Despite significant legal reforms, deeply rooted patriarchal norms continue to hinder transformative change. Gender inequality in the labor market remains a major obstacle to Africa's economic growth. Women's economic parity declined from 61% in 2019 to 58.2%. Women disproportionately affected by back. Despite playing a significant role, particularly in agriculture, low-paying jobs working under difficult conditions and face systemic barriers to accessing resources. Women earn about 70% of every dollar earned by men, with limited access to financial services, job security, and social protection. Without targeted policies to close this gap, gender disparities will continue to hinder Africa's sustainable development. In African parliaments, women hold an average of 24% of seats, while their representation in top executive roles remain only 7%. Local governments are often entry points for women in politics, yet only 21% of African council positions are held by women. However, notable exceptions are there, such as Rwanda, Namibia, South Africa, Senegal, and also Ethiopia, demonstrate progress with high female representation in their parliament. While women in Africa have higher life expectancy in the health, they continue to face significant health inequalities as well. Maternal mortality rates remain highly alarming in Africa, and the gender gap in HIV infection persists due to limited awareness and inadequate access to contraception. In Ethiopia, for example, schools are restricted from some also as young as 15. despite most nations being signatories to CEDAW. The COVID-19 pandemic further exacerbated issues like teenage pregnancy, early marriage, female genital mutilation, and domestic violence, worsening maternal and child health outcomes. The rise in gender-based violence and the challenges surrounding women involvement in peace talk also intensifies amid growing insecurities across the continent, including in Ethiopia. As we reflect on the 30th anniversary of Beijing Platform for Action, it is imperative that Africa takes bold, decisive steps to achieve the gender equality. To conclude, strengthening advocacy, supporting grassroots feminist movement, engaging communities, enhancing accountability mechanisms, and expanding civic space are crucial for sustaining the progress we achieved through the Beijing Platform for Action. Platforms such as today's discussion should be encouraged to help evolve the discourse and also address emerging challenges, paving the way for a lasting transformative change. Thank you very much. I will.
Thank you very much, Sian. Thank you very much. And the 7 salutes for the boys, and I think only 3 for girls. Inequality for females and entitlements for males begins right from birth. And it's not only in your country, it happens in many other countries too, even today, including my country of India. So thank you very much for such a wonderful presentation. And now from Africa, we move to Asia Pacific region. I would request Anjali, invite her once again to share where we are in the Asia Pacific region 30 years after Beijing Declaration came into being. For those who have joined us late, Anjali Shenoy is an intersectional feminist and serves as Program Manager for Monitoring and Evidence Generation for Change at the Asian Pacific Resource and Research Center for Women. Over to you, Anjali.
Sorry, just give me 1 minute.
We saw your screen just now, Anjali. But now
Yeah,
it's
just one, give
yes,
me
yes,
1
yes.
second.
Yes, yes, yes. You take your time. No
Yeah.
worries about that. No worries.
While Anjali is setting up her presentation, I'd like to welcome everyone who is here, and a special welcome to Vasalya. Vasalya, I'm seeing your name after some time. So Vasalya, welcome. She is the leader of Positive Women's Network. Welcome, Vasalya, and everyone else, of course. Great to see you. Anjali, you can begin whenever you are ready. welcome Kalpana. Kalpana is a senior journalist from Nepal, and she leads Health TV online in Nepal, and has begun a new journey with the Health First podcast. So, Kalpana, would you like to give us an introduction while we are waiting for Anjali?
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kalpana. We all look forward to this a new journey. So, friends, we will share the link on email also of Health First, and we welcome to watch it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
Can you see my screen?
Yes, yes,
Anjali.
yes.
Okay. Yeah, okay. So just coming to where we are at, and while as Kavita and Sinan both said, we have made considerable progress. Unfortunately, I'm not going to focus much on the progress in my presentation, but really talk to the challenges further a little bit. Just again to give a quick background on what the review process looked like in Beijing, and this is really where the positivity comes from for us, where we get our strength. It's in the strength of the collectivity. There is a steering committee. Arrow, the organization I belong to, was the co-chair of the. One of the things the steering committee did was to organize virtual consultations before the regional review process. So we had 4 virtual consultations on these 4 themes. So theme 1 was advancing women's economic justice and rights, social protection and decent work. Theme 2 was boosting women's leadership, representation and political participation. Theme 3 is strategies to end discrimination, sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls in all their diversities. And theme 4 was on future forward strategies for gender equity, especially focusing on climate change and digitalization. These consultations were attended by over 500 participants across the 4 consultations. They were virtually held and had participation from across the Asia and Pacific region. At the regional review process itself in Bangkok, we had a young feminist forum. It had close to 135 young feminists, which I would like to believe is amongst one of the bigger youth forums that we have had over the years. The Young Feminist Forum was convened as a dedicated space for young feminists to collectively organize, strategize, and amplify young feminist demands ahead of the ministerial conference. It was organized by the steering committee, young feminist civil society. It culminated in a young feminist call to action that was read out at the ministerial conference on the inaugural panel by a young feminist herself. Followed by the Youth Forum, we had the Asia Pacific CSO Forum. The theme for the same resist and transform. The CSO Forum brought CSO participants from the Asia Pacific region, and the sessions focused on the 4 thematic priorities of the ministerial conference that I mentioned earlier. The CSO Forum served as an instrumental platform for strategizing meaningful engagement and interventions, as well as for formulation of joint recommendations and key actions from the CSO lens for the ministerial forum. Just another point of great joy and celebration for us was not only did we have a high number of young feminists, but we also had, I think, possibly the largest disability rights representatives from the civil society from the region, as well as a huge representation from the LGBTQI community. So it was in true to its word, it was a diverse group of civil society participants that had come together with one goal to talk about gender equality, talk about the four themes that we were presented with and the challenges that we face, and of course, present recommendations to our governments based on our collective this year 2025 when it comes to the Beijing platform for action. Uh, of course, to set the context, we are living in an age of polycrisis, in an anti-rights and anti-gender world. Regressive trends in neoliberal globalization compounded by colonial legacies and neocolonialism. There is a rise of authoritarianism, securitization, militarism, and conflict. It has also unleashed debilitating in the region with intolerable austerity measures, rising inequality, and increasing poverty, exacerbating the impact of COVID-19 and the various climate crises that we are facing. Um, there is a growing anti gender, anti rights argument and intervention from both state and non state actors. Corporate capture of development at the state is a serious problem and continues to impinge on women's rights by perpetuating debt creating mechanisms such as financialization, privatization, deregulation, austerity, public private partnerships, and other anti people and anti women policies. Again, authoritarianism, repression, religious and political extremism, and state violence pose extreme challenges to democracy and the fundamental freedoms that we have, including dismantling of independent institutions, suppression of democratic institutions, especially for transgender, gender diverse, and non binary communities across our region. Moving to economic justice. Structural barriers to women's economic justice, rights, and independence persist across the world of work for women in all their diversities. Contemporary capitalist models use gendered exploitation to extract labor and environmental subsidies from communities in the Asia Pacific region and other parts of the global south and concentrate these firms and corporations in the global north. At work, women are more likely to face workplace discrimination, low wages, poor working conditions, fewer prospects for promotion, and of course, gender based violence. Proliferation of hiring practices that rely on flexible pools of women workers engaged through non-standard forms of employment are on the rise in product supply chains and in agriculture, undermining freedom of association and collective bargaining. Self-employment and entrepreneurship, of course, are promising avenues in the labor market, especially when it comes to inclusion. But all too often, existing business development policies and programs do not attend to gender and disability exclusion, once again making it a discriminatory space. Migration for employment amongst women in all their diversities in Asia and Pacific in the Asia and Pacific region is fundamentally directed by neoliberal reform and development strategies that drive internal and international migration, exposing migrant women to risk factors for violence at each stage of the migration process. This is not to say that uh, advances have not been made or we have had, but this is just to reiterate with representation and participation across the Asia Pacific region, gendered violence, discrimination, lack of opportunities and role models, inadequate participation mechanisms, patriarchy, exclusionary cultural norms, and social stigma exclude women from leadership, representation, and participation. Authoritarianism and the mainstreaming of far right ideologies in the Asia Pacific region also limit leadership, representation, and participation amongst women and girls in all their diversities, especially amongst women and girls from marginalized communities and those facing multiple marginalizations. Technical barriers to accessing information also has its limitations, and the disproportionate burden of care work on women across the region also limits the scope of leadership and participation. Deregulation, rising informal work within the formal sector, and failure to protect freedom of association for women workers limits also leadership representation and participation. Moving on to sexual and gender-based violence against women and girls. Uh, SGBV in marriage, including marital rape and violence during pregnancy, continues to impact uh, women in the region and has adverse SRH outcomes, including maternal mortality, unintended pregnancies, poor pregnancy outcomes, sexually transmitted infections and diseases, and physical and mental health consequences. Women and girls continue to be subjected to female genital mutilation and cutting, early marriages, early and forced marriages, and taboos around menstruation. These practices reinforce control over the sexuality of women and girls, entrenching social subjugation and authorizing other forms of violence. Government reporting on these indicators continue to remain inadequate and not disaggregated. The COVID pandemic, of course, intensified gender based violence in the region, creating almost a shadow pandemic. Militarization, authoritarianism, and armed conflicts, along with the resurgence of right wing populism and identity based vigilante violence, has also had an impact and intensified GBV. Absent or, in most cases, inadequate regulation and enforcement for technology facilitated gender based violence has resulted in TFGBV rising, impacting women, girls, and gender diverse people, especially women in politics and women human rights defenders. Women from marginalized communities face multiple and intersecting forms of violence, oppression, and vulnerability. Critical access to services for GBV survivors remains inadequate, especially life affirming and saving integration of SRHR services. Finally, coming to climate change and digitalization, women and girls from marginalized communities face discrimination in access to services in the wake of the climate crisis. They experience the impact of climate crisis distinctly according to their ages and stages of life. Indigenous women and girls in all their diversities and women from other marginalized groups are excluded from climate mitigation, adaptation, and response planning. Extreme climate events are particularly worsened by market-oriented policies that drive food insecurity and forced migration, especially for women in agriculture. In the field of digitalization, women and girls in their diversities across the region face barriers to accessing the internet and have limited digital literacy. These barriers severely limit access for women and girls with disabilities and women in the agricultural sector. This is just uh, a quick snapshot of the challenges. Of course, there are these. One can expand on these challenges indefinitely and go on talking about them. The reports from the consultation as well as the CSO statements are available, and I would be happy to share them with whoever is interested. Coming to these all of these challenges were of course discussed at the review processes in November last year, and there is a robust report that is going forward to CSW. But CSW itself is not without its challenges. The political environment that we are living in the world that we are living in, is seeing an increased anti-rights and anti-gender rhetoric amongst member states and other religious and fundamentalist groups. This is, of course, exacerbated by the Trump government's policies and the global gag rule that we are witnessing at the moment, giving rise to further concerns of corporate capture of concerns and undermining feminist priorities and priorities of other marginalized groups. CSW sometimes tends to get non-inclusive in its representation because of the high travel costs, cumbersome visa processes, and limited accreditation slots, disproportionately affecting the participation of women and girls from the global south, limiting their participation in the space, thus raising concerns of inadequate representation of diverse experiences from different regions, especially those from marginalized communities. And of course, there is a huge gap in accountability. Agreed conclusions adopted by CSW are non-binding, while these conclusions influence national and international policies. CSOs often struggle to hold governments accountable for their commitments. This limits the tangible outcomes of CSO advocacy during CSW sessions. And yet, it is more important than ever before that as a movement, we continue to engage in these spaces in defiance to these challenges and in resilience and accountability to the communities that we represent. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Anjali, and thank you for mentioning the few positives like the strength and power of collective action, and of course, the many negatives that surround us, including corporate capture of policies and the existing and rather ever increasing anti-rights and anti-gender world. After hearing valuable insights from our speakers on the current state of affairs regarding women's rights in Asia Pacific and Africa, we will now have a quick panel discussion, a quick one in the interest of time, keeping in mind that small is beautiful, short is beautiful. And for this panel discussion, my dear friend Sanju Thapa Magar, Chief Executive Officer of Aging Nepal, will join all the other speakers. So perhaps we can have a quick round of this discussion and in alphabetical order. Anjali, Kavuta, uh, uh, then Sanju and Sian on what is holding us back from delivering on Beijing and its platform of action, and what is the way forward. Some of these points have been mentioned in the speakers' presentations. Anything beyond that which you would like to say? So Anjali, again, please, because alphabetically you are first.
Thank you, Shobha. I think I've mentioned quite a bit in the two presentations I did. But I think in terms of what is holding us back, of course, is largely it's the social political climate that we are living in, and the difficulty for our own advocacy to be heard and seen within this climate because of the severe restrictions on human rights defenders and activists across the region. However, having said that, I think more so than ever, it is the time for us as civil society to come together, to keep aside our differences and sometimes our own politics that get in the way of what we do, and to stand up in the face of these challenges together as one. Perhaps it's time for 30,000 activists to come together again and have another Beijing of sorts, without the difficulties of visas and other processes that hold us back. So perhaps it's that time now to really fight strength with strength and collective strength at that.
Okay, thank you for inspiring and invigorating us. Kavuta, what would you like?
Thank you, Cho. I think in terms of what's holding us back, of course, apart from the usual religious influence in terms of implementation of some of the laws and policies and the deeply ingrained cultural belief systems in Africa, especially, I think there's a lack of proper commitment by our governments beyond just the lip service. They're saying we are part of the Beijing+30 declaration and platform for action. I think going beyond what governments have committed to and actually taking tangible steps towards implementation is what we need to do to achieve gender equality. And for example, as highlighted in my presentation, you find governments again disobey court orders. They end up signing on to foreign laws and policies that contradict what they've already committed to, including the Beijing Declaration. So I think there's need to go beyond signing on to documents and taking tangible action towards implementation. And for us is to have strong accountability mechanisms where we can hold governments accountable, track progress, and question issues such as budgetary allocations, spending. And I think once we have this in place, we can be a step forward towards better reporting. I've seen someone asking, what can we do to make sure that when we come back again to Beijing, to the CSW70, we're not raising the same issues. So I think it's as part of that is having strong accountability mechanisms, and even for some of these reporting forums, holding governments accountable and tightening sort of maybe the sanctions that we take against government for non-implementation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Sanju, now we are keen to listen to hear about your thoughts.
Hello everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me as a panelist in this wonderful and very interesting discussion. First of all, I would like to take a moment to talk about the issues that I'm working and I'm here for. Actually, I'm working for the older people, and now I'm talking about the issues of older women, which is often left behind by all of the advocates and the big portion of government. So, as you all know about the changing population structure with the larger number of older people, here we have now 1.4 billion older people with us, and the number of older women is higher. So by 2050, the number of older people will be 2 billion. It will be double, and the number of older women will be the highest. The situation basically in the limited access to health services. They are the hidden workforce, and they are often left behind by the policies and programs. So they are also subject to abuse, violence, and discrimination. So I would like to request all of you to think about the older women where you are working for women. Don't forget the older women, because we will be the older women, and for that day we have to prepare for now. So for me, I think older women must be included in CSW 69 and Beijing Platform for Action. Though the concept or the issues of older women are not comprehensively included in the BPFA, there are some very specific agendas or issues that is incorporated in BPFA. So without incorporation, the older women, we will not achieve the rights of all women. As I already mentioned, the numbers of older women are increasing, and we can see everywhere older women after few years. So for that, we need this integrated data on older women. Their problem are not identified yet. Their contribution are not identified yet. So we have to recognize their identification. We have to recognize their value in our society as a hidden workforce. Similarly, the very experienced and knowledgeable, skillful portion of our society who is responsible for maintaining harmony and peace in our society. So I would again like to request all of you to think about the older women and work for older women as well. While you are doing very good work for women, please don't miss out the older women and their issues. So thank you.
Thank you, Sanju, and we are with you there. I'm also part of that generation. So yes, they are very much within our fold, and we are all working together. Yes, all force to you and all force to the younger generation to voice the problems of the older generation and find a solution to that as well. Thank you, Sanju. And Sian, would you like to say something? If your internet is permitting you, your internet connection is permitting you to speak, would you like to share your insights? Sian there?
No, she is not there
So
yet.
she's not there. Okay. Okay. So we now open for comments, reflections, and questions from the audience. We already have a few questions and a few comments from you all. There is a question from Paris Mamaita: how to help women who are at the grassroots level? So would any of the speakers want to answer that?
I think let me answer that,
Yes,
Shoba.
yes, please, Kavita, please.
Because there's a very interesting initiative by one of our partner organizations. They're calling it the BEIJING+30 Mashinani. Mashinani is a Swahili word meaning marginalized areas. So what they've been doing is going to these marginalized areas and having conversation with women and girls in those areas, explaining what BEIJING+30 is and what is in the state report, for example, and taking their views in terms of what's actually happening on ground. So I think what we can do is involve women, the voices of women in marginalized areas, taking their feedback as well, and sort of decentralizing this conversation and ensuring that we are getting to the grassroots areas. Not everyone can join a platform such as this on Zoom, for example. Not everyone has access to the internet. But if we could then go to the grassroots areas and have these conversations there, I think it's great in terms of capturing actual feedback on what's happening on ground and what the demands of women are, and ensuring that their voices are heard. Thank you.
Yes, very important, Kavita, because very often, because of language barriers, whatever are discussed in so many meetings, they don't reach the people on the ground unless we talk to them in their local language. Any other speaker would like to add to what Kavita has to say?
Can I add?
Yes, please, Asanji. Yes.
Okay, I just take an opportunity to talk about the older women. Actually, Aging Nepal and some organization, they are working for the grassroots older women. We often, due to our ageist attitude, we often ignore older women for capacity building related training and making them literate in this digitalized society. So we are doing some kind of advocacy related work to voice the older people, older women especially, and similarly to help them to live a normal life in this digitalized society by providing basic literacy class for older person. So we cannot education is not only important for the youth and the child, but it is equally important for older women. And we know that most of the older women are illiterate due to the social taboos and girls education back then and other limited academic institution that time. So this is very important to make them literate and to make them digitally literate so that they can live a better life, as well as though we have our life expectancy is increased, but we are not thinking about the healthy and active old age. So we are also doing some kind of activities at the grassroots level to for the healthy and active aging, especially focusing the older women, because most of the community they have large number of older women rather than the older people. So this is what Aging Nepal is doing to ensure the better life of older women in grassroots level.
Okay, thank you. We have
Also,
yes.
quickly, if I can add, I
Yes,
think
please, Anjali. Yes,
yeah,
please.
I think it's also important for us as civil society to take on the responsibility to be more inclusive, to include marginalized communities in the advocacy work that we do, make sure their voices are placed at the center, and base our demands around them, whether it is at the national level, and whether it's the national level reports that we create, or whether it is at these advocacy spaces that we attend and occupy.
Okay, thank you. We have Kausalya from Positive Women's Network. Kausalya, would you like to ask your question? Kausalya?
Yes, I will do.
Yes, please.
Actually, there is climate changes and also the pesticide, over pesticides, making the women to worse situations of agriculture. So that in added to health of HIV. So that makes things even worse. Because I was right now in one of the districts in Namakkal, in the hill area. So I saw that. So that's why I put it in this questions to this things to you. Can you please add also? They are actually going to change their in the job. So even though they have a land, their own land, and that is actually for worsting to them. So that's why it was thought in during her report. Maybe you can add it. If there is already, it is that thing is there, then you can leave it. So that's one of the things. Another thing is for reproductive health and HIV for women is not even considered, and there is actually for reproductive health department should open to some maybe age was actually for younger age. They are getting something in the infections, so that there is no platform for treatment and early treatment, early diagnosis. So that can be one of the things should be putting it in the health perspective. Already came up with privatization and how it is worsening for even HIV in the privatization also it is worse to accessing health places to other places, that is also happening. So everything is coming up, but this is actually for our HIV community. There is more things are even in older, like the disease came for us in the age of born positive, now become 30 years. They are looking at in actually for 40-50-year-old. So that is also considered actually for older too. Yeah. So this kind of things are happening. They are not able to perform as it is what they are in younger also.
Yes. Points very well noted, Kausalya. Very well noted and very valid points also. Elizabeth has raised her hand. Yes, Elizabeth.
Yes, good afternoon from Kenya. My name is Elizabeth Gatumia.
Yes.
And I work for an organization by the name Kenyan Heart National Foundation. What we do is we do advocacy for heart disease prevention with a special emphasis on children heart diseases. Now, I wanted to find out, first of all, I'm grateful that I received this email. I'm not sure how I got into your system, but I'm glad that I did, because as long as we are working with the communities, then it is a good thing for us to share experiences and ideas as much as we can. So my question is, in terms of collaboration, and I'm very glad that Kavutha, a fellow Kenyan here, has mentioned something about an organization that is in Kenya that is going around sensitizing the ladies, which is a good thing. I would be interested. I'm sure then you have my email. Maybe she can get in touch with me, and we see how we can collaborate on that. But my question is, how much do you collaborate with other organizations that are grassroots based, so that as one message is being spread over this, whether it's HIV and HIV and AIDS, or whichever of them are going around, especially health-related one, because this is where you will find many women. Then you can sensitize them at the same platform. You don't have to look for your own audience. So that piggybacking on other organizations, and then and that is especially now, of course, women who are already mothers. and whether they are young or they are old, as long as they have children, you will find them in those kind of gatherings. Then the other thing is, do you work with organizations like schools, colleges, etc., etc.? I'm saying this because I think it is a good idea to start this sensitization from very early in the girl's life. It is good for them to grow knowing these are my rights. This is what I should do. This is so maybe thinking about how you can work in, with schools and other organizations that work with schools, just as an idea. And thank you for this forum. I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Kavita, would you like to respond to Elizabeth?
Thank you, Elizabeth, for that question, and I'll definitely follow up so that we can see how we can work together. You asked how often do we collaborate with organizations in grassroots areas. I think for us, I must say, not as often as we would hope to, of course, due to various challenges, including financial. But I think because of what governments do in terms of delivery of services, especially in the health sector, what happens is you find civil society organizations end up taking up the role of what the government is supposed to do, instead of just maybe simply supplementing or complementing what's already there. So I think in terms of working with grassroots organizations, I know there's a lot of effort, there's a lot of work being done, but I would definitely say not as much as is needed. And in terms of working with schools and colleges, I think for us, we have various programs with schools and colleges, because as you rightfully say, that's where change and a shift in mindsets needs to happen. So I think for us, we have various programs that we run on that level. But then again, I think we need to see more such programs, and hopefully I can reach out to you and we can share on ideas on how to best go about it. You can reach out to the legal caravan in the meantime so that we can get back to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kavita, and to the rest and the moderator.
Yes, thank you. Yes, can we go on to the next speaker, please?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you. In the interest of time, let's give a place to everyone. Fisatsian has a raised hand. Yes, Fisatsian, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Please ask your question. Fisatsian. I can see Esther Kamba also raising her hand. Esther Kamba.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
I'm Esther Kamba.
Yes, Esther.
From Malawi. Yeah, you can hear me, right?
Yes.
All right. I'm Esther Kamba from Malawi, working with a coalition of women living with HIV and AIDS, implementing sociocultural approach to the empowerment of girls and women and adults and women actually. So in our project, we are using a SASA-faith methodology, whereby we are engaging the faith spaces to prevent violence against women and adolescent girls. So I just wanted to know from other countries, how can we engage men as allies in preventing gender-based violence? I think Kavuta can help me well, because in her presentation she was presenting about gender-based violence. Over. Thank you.
Yes, Kavuta.
Okay, back to me. I think in terms of, I definitely think it's important to involve men as allies in conversations such as this. And I think what needs to be done is allowing for them not to take over the conversation, but just inviting them to spaces such as this, so that we can also hear from them, hear how they think, and also share some of the challenges we face, because even around my friends, every time I tell them I can't work at night, it's a privilege they don't realize they have. So just involving them in conversations, both in informal settings and formal settings such as this, so that we can be able to share some of the challenges that we face as women with them, and also they can share how they're able to sort of come in and intervene, and also for them to realize that they hold a lot of privileges and they have a role to play in terms of protecting women and girls from gender-based violence. I think that would be my response. Maybe the rest of the panel can help me.
Anjali, would you like to add something?
Actually, in India and also across the Asia Pacific region, there are a number of interventions that are working with men and boys on gender-based violence, and some of them have been very successful interventions as well. But I think, as Kavita mentioned, it's always a fine line between involving men and having them take over the conversations. So I think that is a line that we need to maintain and make sure that that doesn't happen. But yes, having said that, there are multiple interventions that are ongoing in the region that involve men and boys on gender-based violence.
Oh, thank you. Would you like to ask your question yourself? She's a senior journalist from Nepal. Yes, Kalpana. Because Kalpana wants to know, how does Trump's new policy impact reproductive rights and gender justice issues globally? I'm sure all the speakers would like to.
Yes, Shobha madam. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, please ask yourself again.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
It is very nice discussion and nice presentation. Thank you all the experts who are presented here. Yes, in Nepal also we are discussing about the Trump's new policy. What would be the impact of Trump's new policy on gender justice and reproductive health rights? So I just want to know what is your opinion? What would be the impact of Trump's new policy in global arena, including like Nepal? I just want to know.
Yes,
Thank
all
you.
our speakers are welcome, please.
Yes. If I can go first, Shobha.
Yes,
so,
Anjali.
Yeah, I think a lot of us have been bracing for impact for a while now, and we are already seeing some of the effects of Trump's policy across the global south. We have seen that we have seen this with the freeze of the US aid funds already. A lot of civil society organizations are struggling to keep their programs and interventions ongoing. And a lot of these programs are, of course, to do with reproductive rights, sexual and reproductive health, even health in general as a public health issue. And the freeze on US aid funds has had a drastic impact, not just on civil society organizations, but also on governments, because a lot of our governments, a lot of our health systems are dependent on American funding, and to a large extent, and especially we have seen in places like Nepal, huge government programs are funded completely by the US, and any stoppage, freeze, or discontinuation of funds is going to mean a collapse of health systems across the region, which is only going to impact SRHR and reproductive rights for the worse. So we are bracing for impact, but at the same time, I think it is a call to our governments to put money where their stand is and where what they are talking about. So if they are talking about public health, our governments need to start pledging their budgets to public health. We have abysmal budgets on health of in India, it is as little as less than 2%. So I think it's time for us to start also demanding accountability from our governments to increase budgets on things like health, education, climate action, and so on and so forth.
Thank you. Yes, Kavita.
Sorry, I think she has highlighted everything that I wanted to. Yeah,
Okay.
let me wait for the next one.
Yes, yes, yes. And a similar question, maybe different, a little bit different. Minu wants to know that presenters highlighted threats like Geneva Consensus Declaration, which is so problematic. Is it threatening progress in nations that are not part of it or those who have not signed to it too? I think that's a very pertinent and important question. Kabuta, Kenya has signed it, so it must be impacting. And what about
Yeah.
other countries? Yes, yes, Kabuta. First you and
Yeah, so I think what usually happens is once powerful countries like the US sign into some of these documents, they end up influencing what countries, especially in Africa, incorporate into their laws. Like, for example, US signing back into the Geneva Consensus Declaration, what is likely to happen is, even for countries that are not signed on to it, we are likely to see local governments coming up with local laws and policies so that they can align with what's happening in the West. So I think we can't just sit back and say that we are safe just because we're not party to some of these laws and policies, because they definitely do influence the political climate and what is eventually passed as law in countries, especially in Africa. So for us, we are currently waiting to see what will happen in terms of even the passing of LGBTQI laws, given President Trump's remarks on only identifying two genders. So what we expect to see is for countries to take advantage of that and align with the stand that's being taken by the US government. So yes, there's definitely impact that might be influenced, felt even within countries that have not signed on to the GCD.
Okay. And Anjali, you have responded to that, but we would be happy to hear from you also, so that we don't miss that part of the box writing.
Sure. I was just saying that even in countries that are not signed the Geneva Consensus, that we are seeing increasing anti-rights, anti-gender, fundamentalist, authoritarian, right-wing populism in many of these countries. So while they may not have signed the document as such, we are definitely seeing a push towards that direction, and that definitely has an impact on SRHR and reproductive justice. So the concern is real, the fear is real. And like Kavita mentioned, when powerful countries like the US take a stand, other countries just seem to follow. So it's definitely something that we have to keep an eye out on, even in countries that have not signed the declaration.
Right. And Maya Joshi wants to know that have all countries part of the Beijing Declaration, which is a UN one? And what about unpaid care work and decent wages? Is that a part of it? Are all countries signatories to the Beijing Declaration?
So 189 are, which is almost all countries.
Almost all.
Yeah, which is almost all. And in terms of unpaid work care, it was definitely a theme in the Asia Pacific region. And it was undertaken under review, and recommendations have also been given in the process. I am not sure about in other regions, but for sure in the Asia Pacific region.
Okay, thank you. And Saida Deep from Pakistan wants to know that perhaps all panelists and others in the session can respond that what needs to happen differently so that we don't have to convene Beijing 35 or Beijing 40. How to urgently accelerate, prioritize, and counter anti-rights push. So please, would like you to share your thoughts.
My presentation when I said that we need to see governments taking concrete action towards implementation and not just plain lip service and signing on to these commitments. So we need to see almost tangible action in terms of budgetary passing progressively. Yes, I think, and also having stronger accountability mechanisms so that we're not just going through the cycle of reporting, recommending, and then coming back again to report and recommend. So strengthening our accountability mechanisms, both in our countries and in some of these spaces that we report to. Yeah.
Agree with everything Kavita has said. I'm just a little more pessimistic in the fact that I don't think we are going to see a change in by 35 or 40. I think we are in this for the long run. But while we are in this to see change. So yeah.
Yes, yes, we should. And we have Catherine, a very senior journalist from Zimbabwe. Catherine, would you like to speak out your comment? Would you like to say yourself? She is again talking about termination of pregnancy or abortion in the case of rape, women who have been raped. And she says, if a woman gives birth as a result of rape, to me, it is like reliving the rape for the rest of the life. Do authorities place themselves in the life of the pregnant woman rape victim for just a day to understand why the urgency should override the investigations? Because sometimes a lot of time is taken in many countries. I think the law is such, again, abortion may be legal, but there are many caveats to it. And there have been cases, I think, even in the courts in India. I do not know much about Africa, that should the laws be a little more lenient there? That is my question is. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. And let me respond in terms of a few African countries that have expressly permitted abortion in cases of rape. But in countries where the same is not expressly provided for in law, like in my country, Kenya, how we've maneuvered this is that our constitution allows for abortion in cases where the health of the mother is in danger. And the WHO definition of health has expanded to include mental health. So a woman who is raped, definitely their mental health cannot be stable. So in offering them these services and working with partner organizations to offer safe abortion services to women that are victims of rape or defilement. That's how we are able to maneuver, by expanding the definition of health to include mental health, and therefore presenting that the health of the mother is in danger. Yeah.
We've also seen, like Kavita mentioned, in many countries, civil society has been working with religious leaders, which is largely where the opposition comes from, on making access to safe abortion available to survivors of sexual assault and rape. And a lot of them have had successes in this area. Also, as Kavita said, we are also, broadening the understanding of health and what it means when a woman's health is in danger, and kind of using that to push for safe abortion services to be available. But also, having said that, something like this is once again underlines the importance of taking into consideration women's lived realities when we are talking about policy and law, and also implementation of laws and policies. In terms of demands from our government, we need to keep lived experiences of women and girls in all their diversities at the center.
Okay, thank you. And now just one last question, I think, because we are running out of time. Manish Chandra says, thanks for the excellent review presentations. And child marriage is so worrisome in Africa as well as in my country, that is perhaps India and the Asia Pacific region. And it also negatively impacts or fails us on education of girls also. So Manish wants to know, is there a decline in child marriage in Africa or countries like Kenya or Ethiopia? And I would also like Sanju to respond to it, what is happening in Nepal and in India as well. Is there a decline and improvement in that? And what more needs to be done? Yes, Anju?
Yeah.
Kavita, yes.
sorry. I think when I was doing a little bit of research, I came across a report indicating a slight decline as of 2025. But definitely there's a lot more that needs to be done to end child marriages. As in my presentation, I highlighted countries like Malawi have passed laws that increase the minimum age of marriage. But not every country has such laws in place. So we need for marriages and also setting the age still very high. Yeah, thank you.
Anjali?
Yes, there has been a decline in India, especially, and other countries as well. But I think again, what is missing is placing the problem of child and forced marriages in the within the larger reproductive justice framework. We are not just talking about one problem; we are talking about a larger issue of body autonomy and women's rights over our own bodies and choices. So I think once again, in many of our countries, these problems are looked at in isolation when they cannot be. And they have to be placed in that larger framework of reproductive justice. And while there has been an improvement, this is the reason why it continues to be a challenge and a problem.
Yeah. Sanju, what is the situation in Nepal? Would you like to?
Yeah, actually, yes, it is also declining in Nepal in the context of Nepal also, but the initiatives that are taking it is not enough. So we have to talk about this and work for this further for improvement.
Okay. Thank you. And I think we have overshot time. It has been a lovely discussion, very informative, very rich. And with this, we come to, okay, sorry, Madhu Sharma has raised her hand. Madhu, would you like to ask your question? Sorry for that. Then we will end. Yes, Madhu. Yes, Madhu.
Okay. Hello.
Hello. Yes.
Yes, I just wanted to know what UN and other organizations like She and Rights, this thing, are doing for the gender apartheid in Afghanistan. I mean, women are not allowed to study, forget about the reproductive health, and those things are all next in steps. Are we
Yes.
able to do something about that? Something?
Here we are not the UN, in fact, but Anjali, would you like to respond?
I mean, I would be out of place to respond.
Yes,
But I think,
yes.
I think there is considerable civil society work and intervention happening, even in Afghanistan and other countries that have restrictive governments in place. Like I said, it's we are in this for the long run. It's not something that we can change overnight. But I know that there is work going on. And I think the best we can do is stand in solidarity and support for that work.
Yes, thank you. And there is one more hand raised up. I had called out for the person, Fisas Sion. Please ask your question quickly. Yes, we are waiting for you. Hello. Okay, I think we should now come to the close of today's She and Right session, which was co-hosted by SEDI, IPPF, Arrow, WGNRR, APCAT Media, and CNS. The session was also live streamed on Dr. TSPR Media channel. My sincere thanks to our esteemed speakers for their rich and valuable feminist insights, and also to our participants for their lively inputs. Special thanks to those who have been consistently reporting on these important issues, including the She Next Saturday, International Women's Day, on the theme of Accelerate Action on Gender Equality. So let us work together and support each other, because the collective has a big good power, and let us support each other for a feminist and gender just inclusive world order where everyone has equal rights, equal dignity, and equal access and control of resources, irrespective of their caste, creed, or gender identity. With this, I say namaste till we meet again. Thank you very much for being here today. Thank you.
Thank you, Shobha.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.